Lucas Shaw from MRC Entertainment put it best when he said, "Kanye West is a producer and sampler of music. Only last week he sampled and remixed a classic tune that has charted for over 3,000 years. The lie that Jews are evil and conspire to control the world for our own gain." This song was performed a cappella in the time of the pharaohs, Babylon and Rome. It went acoustic with the Spanish Inquisition and in Russia's Pale of Settlement. Hitler, may his name be erased, took the song electric. Kanye has now helped mainstream it into the modern era. In response to Kanye's vicious attacks on Jews this week, former basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who is an outspoken ally of the Jewish people and the state of Israel, said that he is especially horrified when a black person spews anti-Semitism without the slightest awareness that they are fertilizing the ground for all racism, especially against black communities. Sarah Silverman, the comedian, wrote that Kanye threatened the Jews yesterday on Twitter, and it's not even trending. Why do mostly only Jews speak out against Jewish hate? The silence is so loud. Never in a million years, when I was studying Talmud at the Jewish Theological Seminary, did I think I would dedicate a sermon to talking about Kanye West. I don't even like to take the time on Shabbos to speak out against Hollywood celebrity gossip. But let's be clear this morning, we are not talking about any other celebrity. We are talking about a man with 32 million followers on Twitter. That's about 10% of the United States. We're talking about a man until recently had endorsements from apparel that we all wear. We're talking about a man who is very clearly and sadly living out his mental illness for the entire world to see. The problem is, with those who have pointed to his mental illness as an excuse, who say, leave him alone, the man is just sick, is that mental illness is not an excuse to hate. As I spoke about over the holidays, there are many people in this room and that we all know who are struggling with mental health, and they go on to live wonderfully productive, not hateful lives. What he is doing is living with no shame and no remorse, which therefore should lead us to question not why we shouldn't speak out because of his illness, but why it is so deeply problematic that more people are not speaking out at all. And why, when the most prominent celebrity, arguably in America, says terrible things about Jews, it's fine for a German company to wait 2 weeks to do an internal cost-benefit analysis, I can only assume, before they decide that it's worth firing an anti-Semite. What are the consequences of staying silent in the face of anti-Semitism? What are the consequences when we stay silent in the face of evil in the world? We only need to ask Noah, who in this week's parasha learned those consequences all too well. Noach, the Talmud of Masechet Sanhedrin points out, was a righteous man, ish tzadik tamim haya b'dorotav. He was wholehearted in his generation. But Rabbi Yochanan says that means that relative to other people who would have not been in his generation, compared, let's say, to Avraham Avinu, Abraham, he would have been nothing. Why? Because Rashi points out that Noach, in the face of God's challenges, is quiet. When God says to Noah, build an ark, there's going to be a flood, does Noah protest? For one moment, does he speak up? He does not. Whereas Abraham, when God says to Abraham, I am going to destroy a city of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham says, hold on a second there, God, that's evil. You can't do that. There could be good people there. Noah gets the order to build an ark. He gets on the ark. The world implodes. Under Abraham, the world becomes worth saving. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory famously called anti-Semitism the canary in the coal mine for civilized society. Societies rise and fall depending on how they treat their Jews, folks. They rise and fall depending on whether or not they choose to respond to anti-Semitism or not. If you don't believe me, take a look at what's going on in Russia at this very moment. You probably didn't see it because it wasn't front page news. But the Sochnut, the Jewish agency of Israel, a humanitarian relief agency, is right now on trial in court in Russia. They are accused of being spies. Putin is following in the steps of Kanye. Or maybe it's the other way around. And I have no doubt that in Russia soon Jews will be blamed by Putin when the war doesn't succeed. It's a tactic that's been used since the beginning of history. And mark my words, I am no prophet, but this incident with the Sochnut, the Jewish agency for Israel, that I visited on my congregational trip to Israel just a few months ago, that no one is paying attention to, this incident will mark the beginning of a flood. I choose those words very carefully this week. A flood that is overtaking Russian society. What happens when a person does not speak out against evil? What happens when we are complacent? We see Abraham Avinu argue directly with God. Abraham challenges God's understanding of justice, and Abraham gets God to concede that if there is a minion of honest people in Sodom and Gomorrah, that the city is worth saving. Abraham, for the record, doesn't save Sodom and Gomorrah. Look at the brave women in Iran today standing up against an oppressive regime. That society is not going to be saved. But what the actions of these brave women teach us is that there is value to human life. They turn our heads and remind us there are good causes and good people in the world that are worth us fighting for, instead of leaving them to be obliterated in the flood that is to come. Noah waits. He waits and he waits and he watches evil overtake his world. Then, when God tells him to build an ark, he goes and does it. It's what we call in the changed literature a technical fix. He doesn't want to fix the world's problems. Then the flood comes. And that, my friends, is why Noah does not merit becoming the first Jewish person. Noah is just a guy. But Abraham, the first Jew, makes the world worth saving. Abraham becomes a leader among men. His is the language of adaptive leadership. He sees a problem in the world, and he creates a new religion that is grounded in what he calls ethical monotheism. That's why Abraham is called in Ivri. What does the word Hebrew mean in Ivri? It means to be a person who crosses the river. Abraham is not afraid to go against the current. Abraham is not afraid to speak up for what is right. There are so many ways that we can read the flood story this week, but in a Kanye-dominated week in the media, Noah is our cautionary tale about what happens when we isolate ourselves from speaking out against evil instead of speaking up and doing something. Refusing to speak out against hate is a lesson that our world has refused to learn time and time again at our own peril, each time to our own detriment. It only takes a Kanye, a prominent voice, to open up the floodgates to hate. It is happening right now. It's happened before. It will happen again. That's why we in this room cannot sit back and let our usual allies fail to speak out. That is why, like Abraham, we must be Jews, we must be Hebrews, we must be Ivrim, go against the current. And we must also remember that one lone voice can be capable of making an entire city worth saving. That means all of us in this room, we can save the entire world. Shabbat Shalom.